Come and have a seat in the Skald circle, and hear the tale of Thor and Loki's journey to Utgard, as told by Casimir and Mynogan. As all good stories start, one day Thor and Loki were bored. So they decided they were going to travel to the land of Utgard, to go and pit themselves against the giants there. And so the gods set out from Asgard, crossing Midgard and Thor's magical chariot. As night began to fall in Midgard, the gods decided to grace a farmhouse with their presents for the night. The farmers, of course, could not turn away Mighty Thor or Loki the trickster. They said the gods could stay in their home, however, they could not feed them. Thor boomed, "What you cannot provide, I will." And so he slew his goats, and told them to cook the meat, but not to harm the bones. Now, the children of the farmer were starving, and the thought of leaving all that good marrow inside the bones horrified them. So after Thor had gone to sleep, the farmer's son, Thialfi, broke open the femur and sucked out all the marrow. The next day, Thor woke up, stretched out loudly in the farmhouse, and walked out to the goatskins piled with bones. He raised his hammer above them and hallowed the bones, and the goats rose alive again. One of the goats, though, was resurrected with a lame leg. Now you see, Thor was not really known for his calm demeanour. The farmers found this out when Thor yelled, "Hoo!" loud as a thunder crack. Now, even on a good day, being woken up is unpleasant. It is even more so when you are woken by an angry thunder god who wants to avenge his goats. Thor roared, asking, "Who disobeyed me? I see the femur is broken." The thunder god raised his hammer and his eyes burned a furious red. The farmer begged for his life and for the life of his children. Thor breathed, and his anger fled. For while he got angry quickly, he was never angry for long. And he said, "I will take Thialfi as my servant, and that is the end of it." And the farmers agreed, because, well, after seeing an angry Thor, this seemed like a rather smashing alternative.
With that, Thor, Loki, and Thialfi set off to Utgard once more, leaving Thor's goats and chariot in the farmer's care, saying that he would return for them later. The three travellers made it to the great waters that separated Midgard and Jotunheim. Loki and Thialfi then found a boat, and the mighty Thor picked up the oars and rowed them with great haste across the waters, and then landed them upon the shores of Jotunheim. It began to grow dark, and Loki was concerned. Thor scoffed. "So the father of Fenrir is scared of the wolves. Fine, Thialfi, go scout ahead for a place to stay." So Thialfi set off into the forests of the giants. Being the fastest man in all 9 realms, Thialfi soon returned, and said that there was a strange hall up ahead. He took them there, and the gods too thought it was strange, for the opening was as wide as the entire hall. There were no windows in it, and it contained 5 small rooms within. The gods shrugged. At least it would shelter them through the night. And so they went to sleep. Late in the night they were awakened by a booming noise from outside the hall that sounded much like an earthquake. It soon abated, though, and Thor rolled over and went back to sleep, leaving the rest to do as they will. The next day the travellers awoke, and outside the hall lay sleeping the largest giant any of them had ever seen. The giant stood up, and Thor was so stunned by the giant's height that he forgot to throw his hammer.
The giant looked down and stooped. "Thor the Thunder, what brings you to the land of the giants?" Thor shook his head and answered, "We mean to go to Utgard." The giant said, "Well, you would not mind my company. We will leave when I have finished my meal." Now, Thor was too astonished to disagree. The party soon left, and the gods and Thialfi had to keep quite the pace indeed to keep up with the giant's steps. They walked for the whole of the day, and then the giant plopped down at the tree and said, "We will camp here." They did, and they had their meal, and soon the giant went to sleep. Now, Thor was angry. He was the thunder god, son of Odin, wielder of Mjolnir. He was not going to let some giant boss him around. So Thor walked up to the giant, raised his hammer high, and struck hard with a thunder crack. The giant bolted up and said, "Eh, what? Did the leaf land on my head? Now, you see, Thor was surprised. Oh, no, I wanted to let you know that we are going to turn in for the night. The giant grunted and rolled over. Thor went to sleep and dreamt of killing giants. Thor awoke in the middle of the night, and the giant was fast asleep. And Thor thought, all right, I'm going to try again. And so he walked to the giant, raised his hammer high, and struck hard and true. The giant bolted up and said, did an acorn fall on my head? Thor, what are you doing here? Now Thor stammered, and said, like you, I just woke up, but it is midnight, so we really should go to sleep, eh? He said while backing away to lay beside his companions. Thor lay awake for the rest of the night, thinking that the next chance he got, he would slay that giant. Early in the morning, when he was sure the giant was still asleep, Thor crept over to the giant and steadied himself. He raised his hammer high in 2 hands, and with all his might, struck a blow that would powder stone. Sure that he felt the hammer sink into the giant's brain. The giant bolted upright and said, Are there birds around? I was just waking and I swear I felt dropping hit me. Thor was thunderstruck. His mighty hammer had failed him, not once, but thrice. The giant continued, It is now not far to Utgard, though it would be wiser for you to go home where you belong. If you will continue with this mistake, though, continue east. You will find Utgard. The giant left them, as the massive gates to Utgard loomed above them. Our heroes were soon at the hall of the giant king. The giants of this land were all as tall as their travelling companion, if not even taller. And the giant king, well, he was the largest of them all. The king welcomed them to his hall, but said to them, Know that you cannot stay here unless you prove your worth, like all of the others here. And so the travellers agreed.
Loki stepped up first and said, Well, I can eat faster than anyone here. I challenge one of your men to an eating contest. The giants set up 2 great troughs of meat, and Loki and his competitor stood against one another. The 2 started eating, and Loki felt he was doing rather well, as he usually did. That is until he looked at his opponent, who was eating not only the meat, but also the bones, and the trough, faster than Loki was eating just the meat. Loki was declared the loser, so Thialfi stepped forward, and said that he could race any of the giant's men and win. The giant king agreed to the challenge, and took them out to the racing track. Thialfi and the giant stood at the starting line, and a track that was much greater than any man had seen before. It passed miles and miles. The first lap finished, Thialfi looked over his shoulder and saw that he was neck and neck with the giant. Things were going pretty well, but then when the second lap happened, he was only halfway through, and the giant was already crossing the finish line. Then at the third lap, Thialfi was barely crossing the finish line from the second lap, when the giant had already finished. Even though he had run as fast as he possibly could, Thialfi was declared the loser.
Thor by this time had had enough of this nonsense. He stepped forward and said, I will drink more than any giant here. The giant king nodded, and had brought out a massive drinking horn, and explained, A man who can drink this in 1 draught is a good drinker. Some may drink it in 2, but no man is so weak that he cannot drink it in 3. So Thor, with a little bit of pride, raised the horn to his lips and drank as much as he could. When he lowered the horn again, well, it looked like barely anything had been drained. The giants around him murmured. Thor scoffed and raised the horn again, knowing he would get it this time. Drank as much as he could in the second draught, and when he lowered it, the mead looked as if it had only been lowered an inch. Thor was angry now. I will get it this time. He raised the horn high and drank until he felt he would burst. He lowered the horn, and already he knew he had failed the test. He looked at the giant king and said, This is not a fitting test. I demand another. Very well, said the giant king. The children here in the hall test themselves by lifting my cat from the ground. It is not very honorable, but it should be enough for you." Now a great grey cat slunk out from beneath the throne and walked up to Thor. Thor, with one mighty arm, lifted with all his strength. The higher he lifted, though, the higher the cat arched its back. The giants laughed at his efforts, and Thor growled and stood on the tips of his toes to lift as high as he could. The cat raised one paw, and that was all Thor could do. The giant king said, "I thought the mighty Thor could do more, but alas, I was wrong." Well, Thor was furious now, and he said, "Give me one more challenge. If I fail, we will leave and never return." The giant king nodded and said, "Go fetch my old foster mother. She is someone who even Thor should be able to wrestle." An old woman hobbled into the hall and into the wrestling ring. Thor seethed, but stepped into the ring and squared off with her. Thor surged at the old woman and found to his surprise she didn't budge. She quickly gained the upper hand, not only in the first, but in the second and even the third round, with Thor trying with all his might to beat her. At his third loss, Thor huffed and said, "Fine, we will leave." And so the defeated heroes walked, with much less spirit, out of the hall. As they left the gates of Utgard, they found the giant king waiting for them. Thor asked, "Have you come to gloat? I know you've made me appear as second best." And the giant king frowned and said, "No, I have something to tell you. You see, I knew how strong you all were, which is why I could not let you stay in Utgard. I used spells to trick you all. It was I who met you in the forest. Do you see those mountains? The ones with the 3 valleys separating them? Those are the results of your hammer blows, Thor. And you, Loki, in your eating challenge, you ate against wildfire itself. It is no wonder you lost. The Alfie, you raced against the speed of thought. Even you could not be expected to keep up. Thor, when you drank from the horn, you drank from the ocean itself, and so much did you drink that you will be able to see how much it has drained when next you lay eye upon it. The cat you lifted was no cat at all. It was the world serpent, which wraps around the entirety of the 9 worlds. You raised it so high its back touched the sky. And finally, when you wrestled, you fought against old age itself. It was a wonder you lasted as long as you did. And that is why we could not let you stay in Utgard. You are far too dangerous. Now, we part once more. For I protected Utgard with magic, and you shall never find it again." Thor, angered once more, went to strike with his hammer. But the giant king had vanished, as had all of Utgard. Our heroes left Jotunheim behind, and went back to Asgard, a little bit more humble than they had been before.
And that is the tale of Thor and Loki's journey to Utgard. Thank you for hearing our tale. If you enjoyed it, please take a look at our Patreon page and learn how you can earn great rewards while also supporting us. Once again, thank you for listening to our story.